Victoria Kane lay still on the white medical bed, her breathing slow and steady through the machines that surrounded her. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping sounds that marked each heartbeat. Outside the large window, stars moved slowly past as the space station Elysium Prime turned in its orbit around Earth. Jake Morrison sat in the chair beside her bed, holding her hand in both of his. His dark hair was messy from running his fingers through it, and his clothes looked like he had slept in them for days. He had not left this room for more than a few minutes at a time since the doctors brought Victoria here 3 weeks ago. "The doctors say you might wake up soon," Jake whispered to his wife, even though she could not hear him. "They think the brain swelling is going down. I know you are fighting hard in there, Vic. You always were the strongest person I know." What Jake did not know was that Victoria could hear every word he said. She was not in a coma at all. The neural suppressors hidden under her skin made her body act like she was unconscious, but her mind was awake and listening. Hidden cameras in the room recorded everything Jake did and said. Victoria watched him through these cameras on a small screen inside her helmet that only she could see. This was all part of a test Victoria had planned. She was the richest woman in the galaxy, heir to Kane Industries, which owned mining operations on dozens of planets. She had met Jake 5 years ago when he was a pilot for the Earth Defense Force. He had been different from all the other men who wanted to marry her for her money. Jake had not even known who she was when they first met. Victoria remembered that day clearly. Her private shuttle had broken down near the military base where Jake worked. He had helped fix her ship and refused to take any payment for it. When she told him her last name was Kane, he had just smiled and said it was a nice name. He had no idea she was worth more credits than some entire star systems. They had fallen in love slowly. Jake had courted her like she was a normal woman, not the richest person in human space. He brought her flowers from Earth Gardens and took her to small restaurants that served real food instead of the fancy places where business deals were made. When he proposed, he did it with a simple ring he had saved for months to buy, not knowing she could have bought the entire jewelry store. But after 3 years of marriage, Victoria had started to worry. Jake had learned about her wealth by then, and he lived in luxury now. He flew the fastest ships and wore clothes that cost more than most people made in a year. Victoria began to wonder if Jake had changed. Did he still love her? Or did he love the life her money gave him? That was why she had created this test. She had hired the best medical team in the galaxy to help her fake the coma. They had put neural suppressors under her skin that made her body act unconscious while keeping her mind awake. Only 3 people knew the truth: her personal doctor, the head nurse, and her security chief. Everyone else, including Jake, believed she was really in a coma. Victoria had arranged for the fake accident too. Her shuttle had crashed into an asteroid while she and Jake were traveling to the outer colonies. Jake had been thrown clear and only had minor injuries, but Victoria had been found unconscious. The doctor said her brain had swelling and she might never wake up. It was a perfect story because no one questioned it. Now Victoria watched Jake through the hidden cameras as he talked to her still form. She had expected him to visit for a few days and then return to his normal life. Rich men did not waste time sitting beside sick wives when there were parties to attend and ships to fly. But Jake had surprised her. He had not left the medical station once. He slept in the chair beside her bed, eating meals that the nurses brought him. When the doctors suggested he take breaks, Jake had refused. He said his place was beside his wife until she woke up. "I have been thinking about our trip to the Rim territories," Jake said, stroking Victoria's hand. "Remember how excited you were to see the new colonies? When you wake up, we are going to take that trip. I do not care if it takes months or years for you to get better. We have all the time in the galaxy." Victoria felt her heart race as she listened. The Rim territories were dangerous and far from civilization. There would be no luxury there, no fancy hotels or gourmet food. It would be hard travel in small ships, sleeping on uncomfortable beds and eating basic rations. She had mentioned wanting to go there once, months ago, just to see what life was like for the colonists. She had not thought Jake was really listening. Through her cameras, Victoria watched Jake pull out a small book from his jacket. It was a travel guide to the Outer Rim that looked well read. The pages were marked with notes in Jake's handwriting. He had been planning their trip, learning about the colonies and what they would need for the journey. "I found out about this planet called New Montana," Jake continued, opening the book. "The colonists there are trying to grow Earth crops in alien soil. They need help with shipping contracts and supply runs. I thought maybe we could help them when we visit. You always said you wanted to do something that mattered, not just make money. Victoria remembered saying that too. It had been late at night and they were lying in bed looking out at the stars. She had told Jake that sometimes she felt guilty about having so much money when other people struggled. She had wondered what it would be like to help people instead of just getting richer. Jake kept talking as he always did during these visits. He told her about messages from friends asking how she was doing. He read her news reports about company business, but he never talked about money or profits. Instead, he focused on stories about the workers and their families. When he read about a mining accident on one of her asteroids, Jake cried real tears for the people who had been hurt. Your board of directors has been calling, Jake said, his voice getting harder. They want me to sign papers giving them control while you are sick. I told them to go to hell. You built this company, and no one else gets to run it while you cannot fight for it. When you wake up, you can decide what to do. Until then, I am not signing anything. Victoria was shocked. The board had not told her about trying to get Jake to sign over control. She made a mental note to remember which directors had tried this trick. But more importantly, she realized that Jake could have signed those papers and become one of the most powerful men in the galaxy. Instead, he was protecting her interests, even though she could not thank him for it. As the station's artificial day cycle dimmed the lights, Jake settled back in his chair but kept holding Victoria's hand. He did this every night, staying awake as long as possible in case she showed any signs of waking up. Only when exhaustion forced him to sleep would he close his eyes, and even then, his hand never left hers. Victoria watched her husband and felt tears she could not shed. The test was supposed to last a few weeks, but already she was learning things about Jake that amazed her. This was not the behavior of a man who married for money. This was real love, deeper and truer than she had dared to hope for. But the test was not over yet. Victoria had to be completely sure that Jake's love was real. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she would continue to watch and wait to see what kind of man she had really married. The news spread through the corporate networks like fire through dry grass. Victoria Kane, the richest woman in human space, might never wake up from her coma. Within hours of the medical reports reaching the business districts, predators began to circle. Harrison Cole sat in his office high above the surface of Mars, looking out at the red landscape through reinforced windows. His company, Coal Mining Consortium, was the second largest mining operation in the galaxy, but it had always lived in the shadow of Kane Industries. Now, for the first time in decades, there might be a chance to change that. Cole activated his communication system and called his head of acquisitions. Start making quiet offers for any Kane Industries stock that comes on the market, he ordered. And find out everything you can about this husband of hers. What kind of man is Jake Morrison, and how much does he really know about running a business? The answer came back within the day. Jake Morrison was a former military pilot with no business education and no experience running a company. He had married Victoria Kane 3 years ago, and most people assumed it was for her money. Cole smiled when he heard this. Men who married for money could usually be bought. Meanwhile, on Elysium Prime, Victoria's board of directors was holding an emergency meeting. Director Lisa Chen stood at the head of the conference table, her sharp business suit making her look like a weapon designed for corporate warfare. Around the table sat the other 11 board members, all of them looking nervous about the future of their company. We need to face facts, Chen said, pulling up holographic charts that showed company operations across dozens of star systems. Victoria Kane has been unconscious for 3 weeks with no signs of improvement. Her husband has no legal authority to make business decisions, and we cannot run a trillion-credit empire without leadership. Director Paul Wright, an older man who had worked with Victoria's father, shook his head. Victoria gave clear instructions about succession. If she cannot lead the company, her husband becomes acting chairman until she recovers or chooses a replacement. Chen's eyes flashed with anger. Her husband is a pilot, Paul. He knows how to fly ships, not how to run mining operations across 50 planets. While we sit here doing nothing, our competitors are moving against us. Harrison Cole has already started trying to buy our smaller subsidiaries. The debate continued for hours, but Chen had already made up her mind. She would approach Jake Morrison directly and convince him to step aside for the good of the company. A simple pilot would surely understand that he was out of his depth in the corporate world. Back in the medical bay, Jake sat beside Victoria's bed, unaware of the political storm building around him. He was reading to her from a book about Earth history, something he did every afternoon. Victoria listened through her hidden monitoring system, touched that Jake remembered she loved learning about humanity's past. The first Mars colony was established in 2157, Jake read aloud. The colonists faced incredible hardships, including equipment failures, food shortages, and dust storms that lasted for months. But they never gave up, and their persistence laid the foundation for humanity's expansion into space. Victoria smiled internally. Jake was not just reading randomly. He had chosen stories about human courage and determination, perhaps hoping they would inspire her to fight her way back to consciousness. If only he knew that she was already fighting the urge to end this test and tell him the truth. The door to the medical bay slid open, and Director Chen walked in with 2 other board members. Jake looked up from his book, immediately alert. He had learned to be suspicious of unexpected visitors, especially ones who wore the cold expressions of corporate executives. "Mr. Morrison," Chen said, her voice smooth and professional, "I hope we are not disturbing you. We need to discuss some urgent company matters." Jake set down the book and stood up, but he did not let go of Victoria's hand. "Whatever you need to discuss can wait until my wife wakes up. She is still the head of this company." Chen exchanged glances with the other directors. "Mr. Morrison, we understand your devotion to your wife and we admire it. But Kane Industries employs over 2 million people across the galaxy. We cannot let the company drift without leadership while waiting for a recovery that may never come." "Victoria will recover," Jake said firmly. "The doctors say her brain activity is improving." Director Wright stepped forward. He had always liked Jake and felt uncomfortable with what they were trying to do. "Jake, we have all come to respect you over the past 3 years. Victoria chose well when she married you. But running a galactic corporation requires years of training and experience. Perhaps it would be better for everyone if you allowed the board to handle operations until Victoria is well enough to resume her duties." Jake was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria held her breath as she watched through the cameras. This was the moment that would reveal Jake's true nature. Was he a man who married for money and power, or was he someone who truly cared about what Victoria had built? "Let me understand this correctly," Jake said slowly. "You want me to step aside and let you run Victoria's company because you think I am not smart enough to handle it?" Chen smiled, thinking she was winning. "We prefer to think of it as utilizing the best qualified people for the job. You could still have an honorary position, of course, and your financial security would be guaranteed." Jake laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Financial security? Do you think that is what this is about for me?" He gestured around the medical bay. "I have been sitting in this room for 3 weeks, leaving only to shower and change clothes. Does that look like the behavior of someone who cares about money?" The directors shifted uncomfortably. They had expected Jake to be grateful for their offer, not to challenge them. "Mr. Morrison," Chen said, her voice getting sharper, "you are not being realistic. Kane Industries faces threats from competitors like Harrison Cole. We need experienced leadership to navigate these challenges. Your wife would want what is best for the company she built." "My wife," Jake said, his voice rising slightly, "built this company by taking risks that experienced executives said were impossible. She succeeded because she was not afraid to try new things and because she cared about her workers, not just profits. If you think I am going to hand over control to people who see employees as numbers on a chart, you are wrong." Victoria felt her heart swell with pride as she listened. Jake understood what her company meant to her. He knew that Kane Industries was not just about making money, but about providing good jobs and opportunities for millions of people. Director Chen's professional mask finally slipped, revealing the ambition underneath. "Mr. Morrison, you are making a mistake. The board has the legal authority to remove an incompetent acting chairman. We were hoping to do this with your cooperation, but we can force the issue if necessary." Jake smiled grimly. "Try it. I may be just a pilot, but I have been listening to Victoria talk about business for 3 years. I know more about corporate law than you think. And I know that Victoria's father built safeguards into the company charter, specifically to prevent board takeovers. You need a unanimous vote plus approval from the majority shareholders, and Victoria's personal holdings make that impossible without her consent." The directors stared at Jake in shock. They had assumed he was ignorant of such details, but he had just quoted company law with perfect accuracy. Besides, Jake continued, I have been reviewing the company's operations while sitting here. Did you know that Harrison Cole has been offering bribes to our asteroid miners? Or that 3 of our shipping contracts are being sabotaged by companies that want to drive down our prices? Maybe instead of trying to remove me, you should focus on the real threats to this company. Chen's face turned red with anger and embarrassment. She had not known about the bribes or the sabotage, which meant that Jake had better intelligence sources than the board did. Victoria watched this confrontation with amazement. Jake had not just defended her company. He had done it with knowledge and skill that surprised even her. When had he learned so much about corporate operations, and how had he discovered threats that her own board had missed? The directors left the medical bay in defeat, muttering among themselves about unexpected complications. Jake settled back into his chair and picked up Victoria's hand again. Sorry about that, Vic, he said softly. I did not want to bring company politics into this room, but they did not give me a choice. Do not worry, though. I will protect what you built until you can take it back yourself. As the artificial night settled over the space station, Jake pulled out his personal tablet and began reviewing reports from Kane Industries' operations across the galaxy. Victoria realized that her husband had been using his time in the medical bay to educate himself about her business. While she lay unconscious, he had been learning everything he could about running a galactic corporation. The test was revealing sides of Jake that Victoria had never seen before. She had married a good man, but she was discovering that he was also much smarter and more dedicated than anyone had realized. The question now was whether Jake's hidden depths would be enough to handle the greater challenges that were coming. 6 weeks had passed since Victoria's fake accident, and Jake's devotion had become legendary throughout Elysium Prime. The nurses whispered about it in the corridors, and even the alien visitors to the station had heard the story of the human who refused to leave his wife's side. Dr. Amanda Foster made her daily rounds, checking Victoria's vital signs while Jake watched every movement carefully. He had learned to read the medical displays himself, asking detailed questions about brain activity patterns and recovery indicators. The doctor was amazed at how quickly Jake had absorbed complex medical knowledge. Her neural pathways are showing more activity, Dr. Foster explained, pointing to the brain scan display. It is a good sign, but recovery from this type of injury can take months or even years. Jake nodded, making notes in a small journal he kept. What about physical therapy? Should we start moving her muscles to prevent atrophy? We have been doing basic exercises, the doctor replied. But if you want to help, I can teach you some techniques. Please, Jake said immediately. I want to do everything possible to help her recovery. Victoria watched through her hidden cameras as Jake learned to manipulate her arms and legs, following the doctor's instructions with gentle precision. His touch was careful and loving, and he talked to her throughout the exercises, explaining what he was doing and why it would help her get better. The dedication went far beyond medical care. Jake had transformed the sterile medical bay into something that felt like home. He had brought pictures of their travels together and placed them where Victoria could see them if she woke up. Flowers from the station's garden sat on her bedside table, replaced with fresh ones every few days. Commander Bob Clark of the station security force often stopped by to check on Jake. The two men had become friends during the long weeks, bonding over their shared military backgrounds. You need to take a break, Jake, Clark said during one of his visits. When was the last time you left this room for more than 10 minutes? Jake looked up from the book he was reading to Victoria. She might wake up while I am gone. I need to be here when that happens. The medical staff will call you immediately if there is any change, Clark insisted. You're going to make yourself sick if you keep this up. But Jake shook his head. This is where I belong, Bob. Victoria would do the same for me. Clark had seen many relationships during his years in the military, but he had never witnessed love like this. Jake's commitment was absolute and unwavering, even as weeks turned into months with no sign of improvement. The story of Jake's vigil had spread beyond the space station. News reports across the galaxy told of the pilot who refused to abandon his wife. Other humans began visiting Elysium Prime just to see Jake, bringing flowers and messages of support. The corridor outside the medical bay was filled with gifts from strangers who were moved by his dedication. Even more surprisingly, alien visitors were drawn to the story. Ambassador Kethavar of the Centauri delegation made a special trip to meet Jake. The tall, blue-skinned alien stood respectfully at the foot of Victoria's bed, observing the human couple with fascination. "Your devotion is remarkable, Captain Morrison," the ambassador said in his musical voice. "Among my people, such loyalty is considered the highest virtue. We believe that love which endures through hardship is love that will endure forever." Jake looked up from Victoria's hand, which he was gently massaging. "Thank you, Ambassador. That means a lot coming from someone of your wisdom. May I ask what sustains you during this difficult time?" Kethavar inquired. "My species lives for 300 years, but even we sometimes struggle with patience during long trials." Jake was quiet for a moment, considering the question. "Victoria is my partner in everything. We dreamed together about exploring the galaxy and helping people. Those dreams do not die just because she is sick. I am not waiting for her to get better so our life can start again. I am living our life right now and she is part of it whether she is awake or not." The Centauri ambassador was visibly moved by this answer. "You speak wisdom beyond your years, Captain. Your wife is fortunate to have such a companion." Victoria felt tears she could not shed as she listened to Jake's words. He was not just waiting for her to recover. He was including her unconscious form in his daily life, sharing his thoughts and feelings as if she were fully present. The depth of his love was beyond anything she had imagined possible. The alien interest in Jake's story continued to grow. Dr. Vera Singh, the station's xenopsychologist, had been documenting the various alien reactions to human pair bonding behavior. She found Jake's case particularly fascinating because it challenged many alien assumptions about human nature. Most species in the galaxy view humans as aggressive and unpredictable, Dr. Singh explained to Jake during one of her visits. But your story is changing those perceptions. The Aquarian Trade Council has started using your marriage as an example of human emotional stability. They say that a species capable of such devotion can be trusted in long-term agreements. Jake seemed surprised by this information. "I am just doing what any husband should do. I do not understand why it is considered unusual." "That is exactly what makes it remarkable," Dr. Singh replied. "You see your behavior as normal and expected, which tells us something profound about human values. Other species optimize for efficiency or logic, but humans optimize for love and loyalty." The changes in galactic perception were having real effects on human diplomacy. Trade agreements that had been stalled for years were suddenly moving forward as alien governments reassessed their opinions of humanity. The Council of Worlds had even scheduled a special session to discuss what they called the Morrison case and its implications for interspecies relations. But Jake remained focused entirely on Victoria's care. He had established a routine that maximized her chances of recovery while maintaining his own health. Early morning brought medical exercises and brain stimulation activities. Afternoons were for reading and conversation, sharing news and stories that might penetrate her unconscious mind. Evenings were for planning their future together, discussing the trips they would take and the projects they would undertake when she recovered. "I have been thinking about that colony ship that got lost near the Vega system," Jake told Victoria one evening. "The news reports say they found the ship, but the colonists are struggling to establish their settlement. Maybe when you get better we could go help them. You always said you wanted to see a world being born." Victoria remembered that conversation from over a year ago. She had mentioned it once, briefly, while they were watching a documentary about colonial expansion. Jake had apparently remembered every word and was incorporating her casual interests into concrete plans for their future. The guilt Victoria felt about deceiving Jake was growing stronger every day. She watched him sacrifice his comfort, his social life, and his personal interest for her sake, never knowing that she was aware of his devotion. The test had already proven what she needed to know, but she found herself reluctant to end it because Jake's care was so touching to witness. Dr. Foster had begun expressing concern about Jake's health. Despite his best efforts to stay strong, the stress and lack of proper rest were taking their toll. He had lost weight and developed dark circles under his eyes. His hands sometimes shook from exhaustion, though he tried to hide it. "Mr. Morrison," the doctor said during her evening rounds, "I am going to be direct with you. If you do not start taking better care of yourself, you are going to collapse. Your wife needs you healthy and strong, not worn down to nothing." Jake looked at his reflection in the medical bay's mirror and seemed surprised by what he saw. The man looking back at him appeared older and more fragile than he remembered. "You are right," he admitted. "I will try to get more sleep and eat regular meals. Victoria would not want me to destroy my health trying to help her." That night, Jake actually slept for 6 straight hours, the longest rest he had taken since the accident. Victoria watched him sleep in the chair beside her bed, his hand still holding hers even in unconsciousness. She realized that her test had become a form of torture, not just for Jake but for herself as well. The next morning brought news that would test Jake's resolve even further. Harrison Cole had arrived at Elysium Prime, requesting a meeting with the acting chairman of Kane Industries. The corporate predator had come to make his move in person, bringing with him offers that might tempt even the most devoted husband. Victoria knew that the real test was about to begin. Harrison Cole arrived at Elysium Prime with great ceremony, bringing a fleet of corporate shuttles and a team of lawyers that filled an entire docking bay. The man himself was tall and silver-haired, wearing a suit that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. Everything about him screamed wealth and power, from his perfect teeth to the personal guards who followed him everywhere. Jake received the request for a meeting while he was helping Victoria with her daily physical therapy exercises. He read the message twice, then set it aside without responding immediately. "Looks like we have a visitor, Vic," he said to his unconscious wife. "Harrison Cole wants to meet with me. Remember how you used to call him a shark in expensive clothing? I think I'm about to find out why." Victoria felt a chill of worry as she watched Jake through her hidden cameras. Cole was dangerous in ways that went beyond simple business competition. He was known for destroying people who stood in his way, using methods that ranged from financial manipulation to outright intimidation. Jake finally agreed to meet Cole in the station's main conference room, but he insisted that the meeting be recorded for legal purposes. Cole arrived with 3 lawyers and 2 personal assistants while Jake came alone. The contrast could not have been more stark. "Captain Morrison," Cole said with a smile that never reached his eyes, "thank you for agreeing to see me during this difficult time. I want to express my sympathy for your wife's condition." "Thank you," Jake replied simply, not bothering to return the false pleasantries. Cole activated a holographic display that showed financial charts and corporate structures. "I will get straight to the point. Kane Industries is in a vulnerable position right now. Without Victoria's leadership, the company is losing ground to competitors. I am prepared to make an offer that would solve all your problems." The offer was staggering. Cole proposed to buy Jake's controlling interest in Kane Industries for enough money to purchase entire star systems. The sum was so large that Jake would become one of the wealthiest individuals in human space, with enough resources to live in luxury for 1,000 lifetimes. "You could buy your own fleet of ships," Cole continued. "Explore any part of the galaxy you wanted. Set up your wife in the finest medical facilities in known space. This offer would give you everything you need to ensure her comfort and your freedom." Jake listened without interruption, but Victoria could see his jaw tightening as Cole spoke. When the presentation ended, Jake was quiet for a long moment. "That is a generous offer," Jake said finally. "But I have a question for you, Mr. Cole. Why do you want Kane Industries so badly?" Cole's smile flickered slightly. "It is a sound business investment. The mining rights alone are worth the purchase price." "That is not what I asked," Jake said calmly. "I asked why you want it so badly." "There are other mining companies you could buy, other investments you could make, but you have been trying to acquire Kane Industries for years. Why?" The question caught Cole off guard. He had expected Jake to be dazzled by the money, not to probe his motivations. "Kane Industries controls the richest asteroid fields in the galaxy," Cole answered, his voice becoming slightly sharper. "It is a strategic acquisition." Jake nodded slowly. "Strategic for what?" "Victoria always said you were planning something bigger than just mining. She thought you wanted to control interplanetary commerce by monopolizing the raw materials that every colony needs." Cole's facade of friendliness began to crack. "Your wife had an overactive imagination. Business is about profit, nothing more." "Is it?" Jake asked. "Because I have been studying your company's operations while sitting in that medical bay. You have been systematically driving smaller mining operations out of business, often using methods that hurt the workers and their families. Victoria built Kane Industries to provide good jobs and fair wages. You seem more interested in maximizing profits at any cost." Victoria felt a surge of pride as she listened to Jake's analysis. He had clearly been doing more than just learning medical procedures during his vigil. He had been researching Cole's business practices, and understanding the larger implications of the takeover attempt. Cole's mask finally fell away completely. Your wife was naive, Morrison. Business is war and the strongest survive. She could afford to be idealistic because her father built the company for her. I had to fight for everything I have. And that gives you the right to destroy other people's lives? Jake asked. It gives me the right to succeed, Cole snapped. Something your wife never understood. She wasted billions on worker benefits and environmental protections that cut into profits. I could double the company's earnings within 5 years by eliminating those inefficiencies. Jake stood up from his chair, and his voice took on a tone that Victoria had never heard before. It was the voice of a military officer who had commanded respect on dangerous missions. Mr. Cole, I want you to listen very carefully to what I am about to say. Victoria built Kane Industries on the principle that business should benefit everyone involved, not just the owners. Every worker in our operations has health care for their families. Every colony we work with gets infrastructure improvements and educational programs. We make less profit because we choose to invest in people instead of just extracting resources. Cole laughed, but there was no humor in it. How noble. And how foolish. Sentiment does not build galactic empires, Morrison. You are right, Jake said. Sentiment does not build empires. But love does. Victoria's workers are loyal because they know she cares about them. Our colony partners trust us because we keep our promises even when it costs us money. Our competitors respect us because we compete fairly. That is worth more than all your financial manipulations. Pretty words, Cole said dismissively. But words do not pay for medical treatments or corporate security. Your wife may never wake up, Morrison. What will you do then? Sit beside her bed for the rest of your life while her company crumbles around you? Jake's eyes flashed with something dangerous. Mr. Cole, you just made a mistake. You insulted my wife in front of me, and you questioned my commitment to her. I think this meeting is over. Do not be hasty, Cole said, trying to regain control. I am offering you more money than you could spend in 10 lifetimes. Be reasonable. Reasonable? Jake repeated. You want to know what is reasonable? It is reasonable to honor the woman I love by protecting what she built. It is reasonable to ensure that the 2 million people who work for Kane Industries keep their jobs and benefits. It is reasonable to tell corporate parasites like you to go find someone else to prey on. Cole's face turned red with anger. You are making a serious mistake, Morrison. I have resources you cannot imagine. I can destroy you and everything your wife built. Jake smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Mr. Cole, you just threatened me and my wife. That was your mistake, not mine. What are you going to do about it? Cole sneered. Challenge me to a duel? This is not some primitive frontier world where disputes are settled with weapons. You are right, Jake said. This is a civilized galaxy where disputes are settled by law and evidence. Which brings me to something interesting I discovered while researching your business practices. Jake activated his own holographic display, showing financial records and communication logs. These are records of bribes you paid to Martian rebel groups to sabotage Kane Industries shipping. This is evidence of tax evasion across 12 star systems, and this is proof that you have been using slave labor on asteroid mining operations in the Outer Rim. Cole went pale as he recognized the documents. Where did you get those files? Victoria kept very detailed intelligence on her competitors, Jake replied. She never used it because she preferred to compete fairly, but she did not destroy it either. I think she knew that someday she might need to defend herself against people like you. The lawyers Cole had brought were frantically taking notes and whispering among themselves. They knew that the evidence Jake had presented could destroy Cole's entire operation and land him in prison for decades. You cannot prove those documents are authentic, Cole said desperately. Actually, I can, Jake replied. I have already submitted copies to the Galactic Trade Commission and the Colonial Justice Department. They are very interested in investigating these allegations. I also sent copies to several news organizations that specialize in corporate crime. Cole stood up abruptly, his face twisted with rage. This is not over, Morrison. You have no idea what you have started. Yes, I do, Jake said calmly. I have started the end of your criminal enterprise. Security will escort you back to your ships. You are no longer welcome on this station. As Cole and his entourage were led away by station security, Jake returned to the medical bay where Victoria waited. He sat down in his usual chair and took her hand. Well, Vic, I think we sent a message to anyone else who wants to try taking advantage of your condition. he said softly. "Cole will be too busy dealing with investigators to bother us for a while, and maybe some of the people he hurt will finally get justice." Victoria was amazed by what she had witnessed. Jake had not just rejected Cole's offer. He had completely destroyed the man's criminal operation. Her husband was far more formidable than anyone had realized, including herself. But the confrontation had taken its toll on Jake. Victoria could see the exhaustion in his face and the slight tremor in his hands. He had been running. The news of Jake Morrison's confrontation with Harrison Cole spread across the galaxy faster than any corporate press release could have managed. Within days, the story had reached the highest levels of galactic government, sparking debates in the Council of Worlds that would reshape how alien civilizations viewed humanity. Ambassador Kethvar of the Centauri delegation called for an emergency session to discuss what he termed the Morrison phenomenon. The great chamber of the council filled with representatives from dozens of species, each bringing their own cultural perspective on the events at Elysium Prime. "Fellow delegates," Kethvar began, his musical voice carrying clearly through the translator systems, "we have witnessed something unprecedented in galactic history. A human male has demonstrated loyalty and moral courage that challenges our fundamental assumptions about his species." The reaction from the assembled aliens was immediate and varied. The reptilian delegate from Vega Prime, Commander Seth, hissed his disagreement. This Morrison acted from emotion, not logic. He rejected financial gain that would have benefited both him and his unconscious mate. Such behavior is inefficient and ultimately self-destructive. But Dr. Xanthor of the crystalline Arcturus civilization disagreed. "Commander Seth misses the deeper implications." Morrison's rejection of immediate profit in favor of long-term principles demonstrates sophisticated strategic thinking. He preserved not just material wealth, but reputation and ethical standing that will serve him far better than stolen credits. The debate that followed revealed how differently various species understood concepts like love, loyalty, and sacrifice. The gaseous beings from the Nebula Collective struggled to comprehend individual attachment at all, while the hive-minded insectoids saw Jake's devotion as similar to their own species' loyalty, but focused on an impossibly small group. Elder Zephlin of the ancient, ethereal race spoke rarely in council sessions, but the Morrison case had captured her attention. The ethereals had observed the rise and fall of countless civilizations over millions of years, and their perspective carried tremendous weight among younger species. "In our long existence," Elder Zephlin said, her voice like wind through crystal formations, "we have seen many species achieve technological advancement. We have watched empires conquer galaxies and civilizations harness the power of stars, but rarely have we observed a species that optimizes for love rather than efficiency, for loyalty rather than gain." The chamber fell silent. The ethereals were known for their philosophical wisdom, and their observations often proved prophetic. "The human Morrison," the elder continued, "represents something we have not seen before. His species appears to have developed emotional bonds that transcend individual survival instincts. This is not weakness, as some suggest, but a form of strength that may prove more durable than any military or economic power." Meanwhile, on the trading stations and colony worlds throughout human space, Jake's story was being told and retold with increasing embellishment. But even the basic facts were remarkable enough to capture imagination across species barriers. Captain Thorak of the Draconian merchant fleet had been skeptical when he first heard the story. His species valued strength and cunning above all else, and the idea of a human sacrificing advantage for sentiment seemed absurd. But when he witnessed Jake's daily routine firsthand during a supply stop at Elysium Prime, his opinion began to change. "I have seen warriors face death without fear," Thorak told his crew after observing Jake through the medical bay windows. "But I have never seen anyone face uncertainty with such unwavering purpose. The human sits beside his mate day after day, not knowing if she will ever recover, yet never wavering in his commitment. This is a different kind of courage than we understand." The story had particular impact on species that struggled with concepts of individual identity. The collective consciousness of the Melody race had always been puzzled by human pair bonding, seeing it as an inefficient allocation of emotional resources. But Jake's example began to shift their understanding. Perhaps individual attachment serves a function we had not considered. mused the Melody Unity during their species-wide deliberations. The human Morrison's devotion has inspired millions of beings across the galaxy. This suggests that individual love can have collective benefits that extend far beyond the bonded pair. On Earth, the human government was struggling to understand the diplomatic implications of Jake's actions. Secretary of Interspecies Affairs Linda Hayes called an emergency briefing to discuss how one man's personal crisis had become a matter of galactic significance. We are receiving communication requests from 37 different alien governments. Secretary Hayes reported to the Earth Council. They all want to discuss the Morrison case and what it reveals about human nature. Some are offering new trade agreements based on their improved opinion of our species' reliability. President Garcia leaned back in his chair, still trying to process the situation. Let me understand this correctly. A former military pilot sitting beside his sick wife has somehow improved our diplomatic standing with half the galaxy. It appears so, sir, Hayes replied. The aliens seem to view Morrison's behavior as representative of human values. They are reassessing their assumptions about our species based on his example. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Humanity had spent decades trying to prove their worth through military might and technological advancement, only to gain respect through a simple act of marital devotion. Dr. Chen Wei, Earth's leading expert on xenopsychology, had been studying alien reactions to the Morrison story for weeks. Her findings were reshaping human understanding of galactic culture. What we are seeing, Dr. Chen explained in her report, is a fundamental shift in how other species categorize humanity. Most alien civilizations had classified us as either aggressive primitives or useful allies. Morrison's behavior has created a new category: emotionally sophisticated beings capable of transcendent loyalty. The implications went far beyond diplomacy. Trade negotiations that had been stalled for years were suddenly moving forward as alien partners reassessed human reliability. The Aquarian Commerce Guild announced new shipping contracts, specifically citing increased confidence in human ethical standards as the reason for their decision. But perhaps the most significant change was happening among the younger alien species. Students at the Galactic University began studying human pair bonding as an example of evolutionary adaptation. The idea that emotional attachment could provide survival advantages was revolutionary for cultures that had always prioritized logical efficiency. Professor Valken of the Andromedan Institute published a paper titled The Morrison Paradigm: Emotional Investment as Strategic Advantage that became required reading in xenopsychology programs across the galaxy. The paper argued that Jake's devotion to Victoria represented a form of long-term thinking that other species had failed to recognize. The human male Morrison, Valken wrote, has demonstrated that emotional bonds can motivate behaviors that transcend immediate self-interest. This suggests that species capable of deep individual attachment may possess strategic advantages in long-term planning and resource allocation. Back on Elysium Prime, Jake remained unaware that his personal vigil had become a subject of galactic debate. He continued his daily routine of caring for Victoria, reading to her and managing Kane Industries operations from his chair beside her bed. Ambassador Kethavar made several more visits to observe Jake directly. During one such visit, he asked a question that revealed the depth of alien curiosity about human nature. Captain Morrison, may I inquire about your long-term plans? Assuming your mate's recovery takes many more months or even years, how do you envision sustaining your current level of commitment? Jake looked up from the corporate reports he was reviewing, genuinely puzzled by the question. I do not understand, Ambassador. Victoria is my wife. This is not a temporary commitment that expires after a certain time period. I will be here for as long as she needs me, whether that is months, years, or decades. The simple certainty in Jake's voice stunned the Centauri diplomat. Among his people, relationships were carefully calculated arrangements with defined terms and exit conditions. The idea of an unlimited, unconditional commitment was almost impossible for him to comprehend. But surely you have considered the possibility that she may never recover. Kethavar pressed gently. What would you do then? Jake was quiet for a moment, looking at Victoria's peaceful face. Then I would take care of her for the rest of our lives. I would make sure she was comfortable and safe, and I would continue to love her every day. The marriage vows said, in sickness and in health, Ambassador. They meant what they said. That conversation, recorded by the station's security systems, was later transmitted to the Council of Worlds and became one of the most studied documents in xenopsychological history. Jake's matter-of-fact description of lifetime commitment challenged fundamental assumptions about rational behavior across dozens of alien cultures. Victoria listened to these exchanges through her hidden monitoring system, watching as her husband unknowingly became a Spock. 3 months after Victoria's fake accident, the Kane Industries Board of Directors made their final move to seize control of the company. Director Lisa Chen had spent weeks building alliances and preparing legal challenges, convinced that Jake Morrison's emotional attachment to his unconscious wife made him unfit to lead a galactic corporation. The boardroom on Elysium Prime was packed with directors, lawyers, and corporate executives when Chen called the emergency meeting to order. She had invited representatives from major shareholders and even brought in outside consultants to support her case for removing Jake from his position as acting chairman. "Ladies and gentlemen," Chen began, activating holographic displays that showed declining stock prices and delayed project timelines. "Kane Industries is in crisis. Our acting chairman spends his time playing nurse instead of making the hard decisions that business requires. We cannot allow sentiment to destroy what took decades to build." Director Paul Wright, one of the few board members who still supported Jake, stood to respond. "Mr. Morrison has successfully defended the company against Harrison Cole's attacks and maintained operational efficiency across all sectors." "What crisis are you referring to, Lisa?" Chen smiled coldly. "The crisis of leadership, Paul. Morrison may have gotten lucky with Cole, but he lacks the experience to handle the challenges we face. The Martian mining operation needs a 50 million credit expansion. The Jupiter colony shipping contracts need to be renegotiated. The asteroid workers are demanding wage increases that will cut into profits. These decisions require business expertise, not military background." What Chen did not know was that Jake had been monitoring the board meetings through the company's internal communication system. He sat in Victoria's medical bay, listening to the debate while holding his wife's hand. "Sounds like they are planning a coup, Vic," Jake said softly to Victoria's still form. "Your board thinks I am too emotional to make hard business decisions. Maybe it is time to show them what a soldier can do when his family is threatened." Victoria felt a chill of anticipation as she watched Jake through her hidden cameras. She had seen him handle Harrison Cole with surprising skill, but this would be a different kind of battle. The board had legal authority and corporate experience on their side. Jake made a series of encrypted calls from his personal communicator, speaking quietly so as not to disturb Victoria's rest. The first call went to Commander Clark, the station security chief. The second went to Dr. Foster, Victoria's primary physician. The third call was more surprising, going to someone identified only as Phoenix in Jake's contact list. Within hours, Jake's preparations began to bear fruit. The first sign came when the asteroid mining crews in the belt around Jupiter announced they were refusing to work for anyone except Captain Morrison and Lady Victoria. The strike spread quickly to other mining operations, with workers declaring their loyalty to the couple who had always treated them fairly. Chen received the news during her board meeting and flew into a rage. "This is exactly what I am talking about. Morrison has turned our workers against the company itself. He is destroying Kane Industries from within." But Director Wright had been making his own inquiries. "Actually, Lisa, I think you should see this report from our Human Resources Department. Worker satisfaction ratings have increased 15% since Morrison took over. Productivity is up 8% across all operations. The workers are not striking against the company. They are striking against you." The strike was just the beginning. The colony shipping pilots who transported goods between star systems announced they would only take orders from Jake Morrison. The trade partners who had worked with Kane Industries for decades sent messages supporting Jake's leadership. Even the alien business associates expressed their preference for dealing with the loyal husband rather than the corporate politicians. Chen had expected resistance, but she had not anticipated the scale of the rebellion. Her attempt to remove Jake had triggered something unprecedented in corporate history, a galaxy-wide expression of support for human values over pure profit motivation. The situation became even more complicated when news of the board's actions reached the galactic media. Reporter Sarah Kim of the Interstellar News Network arrived at Elysium Prime with a full camera crew. broadcasting live updates about the corporate war brewing around Jake Morrison. This is Sarah Kim reporting from Elysium Prime, where a battle for control of the galaxy's largest mining corporation has become a test of human values versus corporate ambition, she announced to viewers across dozens of star systems. At the center of this conflict is Captain Jake Morrison, a man who has spent 3 months caring for his unconscious wife while fighting to preserve her life's work. The news coverage was devastating to Chen's position. Public opinion across human space rallied behind Jake, with protests forming outside Kane Industries offices on multiple planets. The protesters carried signs reading "Love over Profit" and "Support Captain Morrison," turning the corporate dispute into a broader cultural movement. But Chen had one more card to play. She had discovered that Jake's mysterious contact, Phoenix, was actually Victoria's former security chief, a woman named Kate Phoenix who had left the company under mysterious circumstances 2 years earlier. Chen intended to use this connection to paint Jake as part of some conspiracy. "Mr. Morrison has been secretly communicating with Kate Phoenix," Chen announced to the board. "Phoenix was fired for industrial espionage and security violations. The fact that Morrison is working with her proves he cannot be trusted with company leadership." What Chen did not know was that Kate Phoenix had been investigating corruption within Kane Industries when she was forced to leave. Victoria had privately supported Phoenix's work while publicly maintaining distance to protect both their positions. Jake's contact with Phoenix was not conspiracy. It was continuation of Victoria's own anti-corruption efforts. The truth came out when Phoenix herself arrived at Elysium Prime with a complete dossier of evidence against several board members, including Chen. The documents revealed kickbacks, embezzlement, and secret deals with competitors that had cost Kane Industries millions of credits. Jake called an emergency board meeting, walking into the conference room for the first time since Victoria's accident. He looked tired and worn from months of stress, but his voice was steady and strong when he spoke. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a problem. Several members of this board have been stealing from the company and betraying Victoria's trust. I have evidence of financial crimes that will send people to prison if they are not addressed immediately." Chen tried to interrupt, but Jake continued without pause. "Director Chen, you have been taking payments from Harrison Cole in exchange for inside information about company operations. Director Murphy, you have been embezzling funds from the worker pension accounts. Director Santos, you have been selling shipping schedules to pirates who attack our supply convoys." The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Phoenix had spent 2 years building an airtight case against the corrupt board members, waiting for the right moment to expose them. Jake's leadership crisis had provided that moment. "All 3 of you are fired, effective immediately," Jake announced. "Security will escort you from the premises and criminal charges will be filed within the hour. The remaining board members will vote on whether to support my continued leadership or join their colleagues in unemployment." The vote was unanimous. Even the directors who had supported Chen's rebellion recognized that Jake had just saved the company from criminal elements that could have destroyed it completely. The corporate war was over, and Jake had won without firing a shot. But the victory came at a personal cost. Jake returned to Victoria's medical bay exhausted and emotionally drained from the confrontation. He collapsed into his chair beside her bed, putting his head in his hands. "I hope you are proud of me, Vic," he whispered. "I protected your company like you would have wanted, but I do not know how much more of this I can take. I need you to wake up soon. I need my partner back." Victoria watched her husband break down and felt her heart shatter. The test had proven everything she needed to know about Jake's character, but it was destroying the man she loved in the process. The deception had gone too far, and it was time to end it before she lost Jake forever. The question now was how to reveal the truth without destroying their marriage in the process. Victoria had tested Jake's love and found it pure, but how would he react when he learned that his months of suffering had been based on a lie? Victoria could not continue the deception any longer. Watching Jake break down after his victory over the corrupt board members had shattered her resolve completely. The man she loved was destroying himself to protect her and her legacy, never knowing that she was aware of every sacrifice he made. Dr. Foster entered the medical bay for her evening rounds, finding Jake slumped in his chair with his head in his hands. The doctor had grown genuinely fond of Jake over the past months and was deeply concerned about his deteriorating condition. "Mr. Morrison, you look terrible," she said gently. When was the last time you had a proper meal or a full night's sleep? Jake looked up with tired eyes. I am fine, doctor. Just dealing with some business stress. How is Victoria today? Any changes in her condition? Dr. Foster checked the monitoring displays, unaware that she was looking at falsified readings created by Victoria's neural suppressors. Her brain activity continues to show improvement. I am cautiously optimistic that she may begin showing signs of consciousness soon. Soon, Jake repeated hollowly. Everyone keeps saying soon, but it has been 3 months. What if she never wakes up, doctor? What if I spend the rest of my life talking to someone who cannot hear me? The despair in Jake's voice cut through Victoria like a knife. She activated the hidden communication system that connected her to Dr. Foster's private office and sent an encrypted message to the doctor's personal tablet. The message contained a single line: "Begin the awakening protocol tonight." Dr. Foster excused herself from the medical bay and hurried to her office, where she found the message waiting. She immediately contacted Victoria's security chief and the head nurse, the only other people who knew about the deception. Within an hour, they had gathered in the secure conference room to plan Victoria's recovery. Mrs. Kane wants to begin waking up tonight, Dr. Foster announced. We need to gradually reduce the neural suppressor levels over the next several hours to make it look like a natural recovery process. Head nurse Patricia Wells looked worried. Are we sure about this timing? Mr. Morrison is in terrible condition. The shock of his wife suddenly recovering might be too much for him to handle. Victoria's security chief, Commander Lisa Torres, disagreed. The shock of her continued unconsciousness is killing him slowly. If we wait much longer, there might not be anything left to save. They began the process immediately, slowly reducing the strength of the neural suppressors while monitoring Victoria's vital signs. To any observer, it would appear that her brain was naturally healing and consciousness was gradually returning. Jake noticed the changes within hours. Victoria's breathing became less regular, and her eyelids began to flutter occasionally. The monitoring displays showed increased brain activity in areas associated with awareness and memory processing. Dr. Foster, Jake called excitedly when he saw the changes. Something is happening. Victoria is moving. Dr. Foster arrived quickly and made a show of examining Victoria thoroughly. This is very encouraging, Mr. Morrison. It appears that her brain is beginning to emerge from the coma state. We should see more signs of consciousness over the next day or two. Jake spent that night holding Victoria's hand and talking to her constantly, convinced that his voice might help guide her back to consciousness. He told her about everything that had happened during her illness, the corporate battles, the alien interest in their story, and his plans for their future together. I know you can hear me somewhere in there. Jake whispered, I need you to come back, Vic. I have been trying to be strong, but I'm not as good at this as you are. I need my partner back. Victoria felt tears streaming down her face as she listened, grateful that the neural suppressors were no longer preventing her from showing emotional responses. When Jake noticed the tears, he called for Dr. Foster immediately. She is crying, Jake said with wonder in his voice. Victoria is crying. That means she can hear me, right? Dr. Foster nodded professionally while hiding her own emotional response. Emotional reactions are often the first sign of returning consciousness. Keep talking to her, Mr. Morrison. Your voice may be helping to guide her recovery. Over the next 12 hours, Victoria gradually began to show more signs of awareness. Her eyes moved beneath closed lids, tracking sounds in the room. Her fingers occasionally squeezed Jake's hand when he spoke to her. Her breathing patterns changed in response to his voice. Jake never left her side during this critical period, encouraging every small sign of improvement and celebrating each tiny movement as a victory. His exhaustion disappeared as hope replaced despair, and Victoria could see the life returning to his eyes. Finally, after nearly 4 months of deception, Victoria allowed herself to wake up. She opened her eyes slowly, blinking in the soft lighting of the medical bay. The first thing she saw was Jake's face, older and more worn than she remembered, but filled with joy and relief. Jake? She whispered, her voice weak from months of apparent disuse. Jake broke down completely, sobbing with relief as he held her hand against his cheek. Victoria, thank God, I thought I had lost you forever. I have been so scared, so alone without you. Victoria struggled to sit up, and Jake immediately helped support her, his touch gentle and careful. How long? She asked, playing her part perfectly. 3 months and 2 weeks, Jake answered. You have been unconscious since the shuttle accident. The doctor said you might never wake up, but I never stopped believing you would come back to me. The guilt Victoria felt was overwhelming, but she forced herself to continue the charade for a little longer. What happened while I was gone? How is the company? Jake laughed through his tears. The company is fine. I had to fight off Harrison Cole and fire half your board of directors, but everything is safe. I promised you I would protect what you built, and I did. Over the next several hours, Jake told Victoria everything that had happened during her fake coma. He described his confrontation with Cole, the board rebellion, the galaxy-wide support from workers and aliens, and his determination to preserve her legacy no matter what the cost. Victoria listened with amazement, realizing that her test had revealed not just Jake's love, but capabilities she had never suspected he possessed. Her husband was not just devoted, he was intelligent, strategic, and powerful when protecting what he cared about. I am so proud of you, Victoria said, meaning every word. You did everything perfectly, Jake. You protected our workers, preserved our values, and kept the company safe. I could not have done better myself. Jake shook his head. I just did what you would have wanted. Everything I learned about business, I learned from listening to you. You were always the smart one, Vic. I just tried to think about what you would do in each situation. Dr. Foster conducted a thorough examination and declared Victoria's recovery to be miraculous but medically sound. Her brain scans show normal function with no lasting damage from the injury. With proper rest and physical therapy, she should make a complete recovery. As the news of Victoria's awakening spread through the station and then across the galaxy, Jake finally allowed himself to rest. He fell asleep in the chair beside Victoria's bed, holding her hand just as he had for months. Victoria watched her husband sleep and knew that she would have to tell him the truth soon. The test was over, and Jake had passed beyond her wildest expectations. But revealing the deception would be the most dangerous moment of their relationship. She had tested Jake's love and found it pure and unbreakable. Now she had to discover whether that love was strong enough to survive the truth about what she had done to him. The hardest part of the test was still to come. Victoria knew she could not keep the secret forever. 3 days after her fake awakening, as Jake helped her with physical therapy exercises in the medical bay, she made the most difficult decision of her life. She had to tell him the truth about the test, no matter what it might cost their marriage. Jake, she said softly, stopping in the middle of a leg exercise. I need to tell you something important, something that might change everything between us. Jake immediately stopped what he was doing and knelt beside her bed, concern filling his eyes. What is it, Vic? Are you feeling worse? Should I call Dr. Foster? Victoria took a deep breath, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the future of their relationship. Jake, I was never in a coma. The whole thing was fake. I planned the accident and hired doctors to help me pretend to be unconscious. I wanted to test whether you really loved me or just my money. The silence that followed was the longest of Victoria's life. Jake stared at her with an expression she could not read, his face cycling through confusion, disbelief, and something that might have been hurt. You were awake the whole time? Jake asked quietly. You heard everything I said, saw everything I did? Victoria nodded, tears starting to flow down her cheeks. I watched you through hidden cameras. I heard every word you spoke to me. I saw you refuse Harrison Cole's offer, fight the board, and sacrifice everything to protect what I built. Jake, I saw you love me in ways I never dared to hope for. Jake stood up slowly, walking to the window that looked out at the stars. He was quiet for a long time, and Victoria felt her heart breaking as she waited for his response. 4 months, Jake said finally. 4 months of thinking I might lose you forever. 4 months of watching you lie there helpless while I tried to be strong enough for both of us. Jake, I am so sorry, Victoria whispered. I know it was wrong. I know I hurt you. But I had to know if your love was real. Jake turned around, and Victoria was surprised to see that he was not angry. Instead, his expression was thoughtful, as if he was trying to work through a complex problem. You tested me, he said slowly, like a military training exercise. You wanted to see how I would perform under pressure. Victoria nodded, not trusting her voice to speak. Jake walked back to her bedside and sat down in the chair he had occupied for months. Vic, do you know what I learned during those 4 months? Victoria shook her head, afraid of what he might say. I learned that I love you more than I ever imagined possible. Jake said simply. I learned that I would rather sit beside your unconscious body for the rest of my life than live without you. I learned that protecting what you built and caring for the people you love is more important to me than anything else in the galaxy. Victoria stared at him in amazement.
You are not angry?
Jake smiled, and it was the first genuine smile Victoria had seen from him in months. Vic, you tested my love and found it real. How can I be angry about that? You gave me the chance to prove to myself and to the galaxy that my feelings for you are genuine. The relief Victoria felt was overwhelming. But Jake was not finished speaking. Besides, he continued, I think you learned something during your test too. You discovered that the man you married is capable of protecting you and your legacy. You found out that I'm not just a simple pilot who got lucky. I can handle corporate politics, business strategy, and galactic diplomacy when I need to. Victoria reached for Jake's hand, squeezing it tightly. I discovered that I married the most remarkable man in the galaxy. Jake, what you accomplished during my fake coma was incredible. You proved to everyone, including me, that humans are capable of love and loyalty that transcends personal gain. Over the next few days, Victoria gradually revealed the truth to the small circle of people who had helped with the deception. Dr. Foster was relieved that the charade was over, having grown genuinely fond of Jake during his months of devoted care. The security team and nursing staff were amazed by Jake's reaction to the revelation, seeing it as further proof of his exceptional character. But the most important conversation came when Victoria had to decide whether to reveal the truth to the galaxy at large. The story of Jake's devotion had become legendary across dozens of worlds, inspiring changes in diplomatic relations and cultural attitudes toward humanity. If we tell everyone it was a test, Victoria said during a private discussion with Jake, it might undermine all the good that came from your example. Jake considered this carefully. Or it might make the story even more powerful. I was not just showing devotion to my unconscious wife. I was proving that human love is strong enough to survive the ultimate test. They decided to release the truth gradually, starting with a carefully crafted statement to the galactic media. The revelation that Victoria's coma had been a test created an even bigger sensation than the original story had. Reporter Sarah Kim of the Interstellar News Network was the first to interview the couple after the truth came out. Mrs. Kane, some people are calling your test cruel and manipulative. How do you respond to those criticisms? Victoria looked directly into the camera. I acknowledge that my test caused Jake pain and I regret that deeply. But it also revealed truths about human nature that have benefited our entire species. Sometimes the most important discoveries require difficult experiments. Captain Morrison, Sarah continued, how do you feel about being tested without your knowledge? Jake smiled calmly. I feel honored that my wife trusted me enough to put our love to the ultimate test. And I'm proud that I passed that test not just for us but for all of humanity. The galactic reaction to the revelation was immediate and unprecedented. Instead of condemnation, most alien species expressed even greater admiration for human nature. The fact that Jake had remained devoted even under testing conditions proved that human loyalty was not just emotional impulse, but genuine character strength. Ambassador Kethvar of the Centauri delegation called for another emergency session of the Council of Worlds. The Morrison case has evolved beyond anything we anticipated, he announced. These humans have demonstrated that their species is capable of both sophisticated strategic thinking and unbreakable emotional bonds. This combination may make them the most remarkable species in galactic history. The Council voted unanimously to establish the Morrison Accords, a new framework for interspecies cooperation based on the principles of loyalty, trust, and mutual support that Jake and Victoria had demonstrated. For the first time in galactic history, emotional commitment was recognized as a legitimate basis for diplomatic agreements. The changes extended far beyond politics. Marriage customs throughout the galaxy began incorporating Morrison vows, promises of unwavering devotion regardless of circumstances. Young beings of dozens of species studied the Morrison story as an example of how love could transcend individual self-interest. On Earth, the human government established the Morrison Institute for Interspecies Relations, dedicated to teaching other species about human values and emotional capabilities. Jake and Victoria were invited to serve as the Institute's first directors, a position that would allow them to travel the galaxy and share their story with other worlds. But perhaps the most significant change was in how humanity saw itself. The Morrison case had proven that human emotions were not weaknesses to be hidden from alien observers, but strengths that could serve as the foundation for galactic leadership. Victoria and Jake used their newfound reputation to establish the first interspecies adoption agency, helping human and alien children find families across the stars. They also created the Loyalty Foundation, which provided support for beings who sacrificed personal gain to protect their families and communities. Years later, as Victoria and Jake explored the Outer Rim territories they had once dreamed about, they carried with them the respect of a galaxy that had learned what it truly meant to be human. Their love story had become legend, taught in schools across dozens of worlds as proof that emotional bonds could be stronger than any military or economic power. "Do you ever regret the test?" Jake asked Victoria one evening as they sat in their ship's observation deck, watching alien suns set over a distant colony world. Victoria considered the question seriously. "I regret the pain it caused you, but I do not regret learning the truth about your character. And I do not regret showing the galaxy what humans are capable of when we love without limits." Jake squeezed her hand, looking out at the stars that had become their home. "Then it was worth it. We changed not just our own lives, but the future of human relations with the galaxy. Our love became something bigger than either of us alone." The Morrison story had proved that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their military might, but their capacity for love that transcended individual survival. In a galaxy full of species that optimized for efficiency and logic, humans had shown that optimizing for